Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie The Equalizer in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is The Equalizer. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch The Equalizer film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So let's start the video. The Equalizer is a 2014 American vigilante action thriller film directed by Antoine Fuqua and written by Richard Wenk. It is based on the 1980s TV series of the same title and the first of 3 films starring Denzel Washington. The cast includes Marton Csokas, Chloë Grace Moretz, David Harbour, Bill Pullman, and Melissa Leo. Washington plays Robert McCall, an ex-Marine and DIA officer who reluctantly returns to action to protect a teenage trafficking victim from the members of the Russian mafia. Principal photography took place in Massachusetts from May 2013 to September 2013. The world premiere for The Equalizer was held at 2014 Toronto International Film Festival on September 7, 2014, and it was released worldwide on September 26, 2014. The film received mixed reviews from critics and grossed $192.3 million worldwide. The sequels, The Equalizer 2 was released on July 20, 2018, and The Equalizer 3 was released on September 1, 2023. Plot: Robert McCall, a former Marine and retired DIA DCS officer, lives in Boston and works at a big box home improvement store. He helps his colleague Ralphie train to become a security guard. Unable to sleep, Robert often spends late nights reading at an all-night diner, where he befriends Terry, a teenage sex worker trafficked by the Russian mafia. One evening, Terry shares that her real name is Alina and that she dreams of becoming a singer. Robert and Alina take a stroll, but Alina's pimp Slavy abruptly arrives, hits her, and forces her into a car. Slavy hands Robert a business card for their escort service before driving away. A few nights later, a badly injured Alina is admitted to the ICU at a nearby hospital. Upon hearing the news, Robert learns from her friend Mandy that Slavy is responsible for her condition. Finding Slavy and his men at their restaurant, he is bluntly refused when he offers to buy Alina's freedom, so he swiftly kills them all. Unbeknownst to Robert, Slavy and his men are part of a much larger crime syndicate led by Russian oligarch Vladimir Pushkin. Teddy Renson, Pushkin's enforcer, arrives in Boston to investigate the attack. Aided by Boston police detectives on Pushkin's payroll, Teddy canvasses rival gangs in the area, nearly beating Irish mob lieutenant Little John Looney to death to send a message. Robert continues exacting vigilante justice on the criminals he encounters. He blackmails 2 corrupt cops into returning racketeering money to Ralphie's mother and beats a gunman with a hammer after he robbed the hardware store, taking a co-worker's heirloom ring from her. Teddy kills Mandy after learning that she has concealed information about Robert. He visits Robert at his apartment, where both try to intimidate each other. Teddy and his goons later try to kidnap Robert, who eludes them. Robert's former DIA colleague, Susan Plummer, identifies Teddy as Nikolai Ichenko, formerly of USSR Secret Police, with Spetsnaz background. He has murdered 2 of the Boston police detectives who failed to kidnap Robert. A third, named Frank Masters, had not been heard from for days. Susan also briefs Robert on Pushkin's operation. Robert tracks Masters down and threatens him into helping take down one of Pushkin's money laundering warehouses. Masters and Pushkin's men are taken into custody when the police arrive and find a note left by Robert to follow the money. He confronts Nikolai again, threatening to commit more damage if he continues to pursue him. Robert destroys two of Pushkin's oil tankers. Nikolai abducts Robert's coworkers at the hardware store to force him for a meeting. To Nikolai's surprise, Robert skips the meeting and kills the men to ensure the safety of the hostages they were guarding. Nikolai arrives with his men, but Robert stealthily kills them with improvised weapons collected throughout the hardware store, and later kills Nikolai with a rivet gun to save a cornered Ralphie. 3 days later, Robert finds Pushkin at his Moscow mansion, kills the guards, and tricks him into electrocuting himself. Alina, following her recovery, runs into Robert and shares that she has started a new life with the money that was left at her hospital bed by him. Inspired to continue helping others, Robert responds to online ads requesting help, calling himself the Equalizer. Cast: Denzel Washington as Robert McCall, Marton Csokas as Teddy Nikolai, Chloë Grace Moretz as Terry Alina, David Harbour as Frank Masters, Haley Bennett as Mandy, Bill Pullman as Brian Plummer. In addition, Alan Maldonado plays Robert's coworker Marcus. Robert Wahlberg and Timothy John Smith play the crooked Boston Police Department detectives, and Johnny Messner plays one of Teddy's henchmen. Production, development, and casting. In April 2005, it was announced producer Mace Newfold had partnered with Michael Sloan, co-creator of The Equalizer, and producer Tony Eldridge, to come up with the idea for adapting the series to film while working on another project. In December of that year, the Weinstein Company had acquired the rights to develop the film. In June 2007, it was reported that Michael Connelly and Terrell Lee Langfer were hired to pen the screenplay with Paul McGuigan slated to direct. In June 2010, it was announced that Russell Crowe was trying to bring The Equalizer to the big screen, directed by Paul Haggis, with Crowe intending to play Robert McCall. In December 2011, it was reported that Denzel Washington would star in the title role of the film version, to be financed by Sony Pictures Entertainment and Escape Artists. In 2012, Nicholas Winding Refn entered talks to direct the remake, but the deal with Sony fell through for unknown reasons. Director Antoine Fuqua came on board to direct on March 21, 2013, reuniting him with Washington after their successful collaboration on the 2001 Oscar-winning film Training Day. Chloë Grace Moretz was announced as a co-star on May 10, 2013. Anna Kendrick, Kelly MacDonald, and Nina Dobrev were also considered. On May 31, 2013, Melissa Leo was cast in the film. Leo previously worked with Washington in the 2012 film Flight, and with Fuqua in Olympus Has Fallen, 2013. Coincidentally, Leo actually guest-starred in a Season 1 episode of the original Equalizer television series titled The Defector, in which she portrayed the daughter of a former Soviet agent who enlists McCall's help to defect to the United States. Marton Csokas was cast to play the villain on May 17th. Filming. Principal photography began in May 2013 at various locations throughout Boston, including Haverhill, Hamilton, Ipswich, and Swampscott. Filming wrapped in September 2013. In the scene where McCall attempts to suffocate Masters in his car, it is a Series 3 Jaguar XJ6 revealed in the shot of the hose into the tailpipe. The Jaguar was famously used in the original television series. Music. Further information, The Equalizer. On June 21, 2013, Harry Gregson Williams was hired to compose the music for the film. Varese Sarabande released a soundtrack album for The Equalizer on September 23, 2014. The song Guts Over Fear by rapper Eminem featuring Sia, with production by Emil Haney, premiered in trailers for the film. The song also plays over the closing credits. Harry Gregson Williams. Score received critical acclaim for its ability to heighten the tension and atmosphere of the film. The album peaked at number 26 on the Billboard 200 chart, showcasing the popularity of the music beyond the movie itself. Guts Over Fear became a significant component of the film's marketing campaign, garnering widespread attention and further solidifying The Equalizer's impact on popular culture. Release, promotion, and marketing. The first official image from the film was released on December 6, 2013. On August 6, 2012, Sony had originally planned on an April 11, 2014 release date, but on July 5, 2013, the release date pushed back to September 26, 2014. The first official poster for the film was released on April 16, 2014. On April 22nd, USA Today revealed photos from the film. On May 24th, the trailer for the film was released. On June 12th, another official trailer for the film was released. On July 16th, the IMAX poster for the film was released. Innovative marketing tactics were employed for the film's promotion, including placing a viral ad in the New York Times Sunday Classifieds, generating buzz and intrigue among potential viewers. Denzel Washington's commanding presence in the lead role was a key factor in drawing audiences, with his portrayal serving as a major selling point in promotional materials. Social media campaigns and targeted advertising further bolstered anticipation for the film's release, engaging with audiences across various platforms. The release date shift from April to September allowed for a more strategic positioning, capitalizing on a less competitive market window and ultimately contributing to the film's box office success. Theatrical release. The film's premiere was held at the 2014 Toronto International Film Festival on September 7, 2014. Sony released the film in theaters worldwide on September 26, 2014. At the Toronto International Film Festival premiere, Denzel Washington and Chloë Moretz captivated audiences with their dynamic performances, generating early excitement and positive reviews. Following its festival debut, The Equalizer received widespread acclaim, solidifying anticipation for its global theatrical release on September 26, 2014. Home media. The Equalizer was released on Blu-ray and DVD on December 9, 2014 by Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. Later, it was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray on July 10, 2018, 10 days before the sequel was released in theaters. Reception. Box office. The Equalizer grossed $101.5 million in North America and $90.8 million in other territories for a worldwide gross of $192.3 million. Its net production budget was estimated between $55 to $73 million. The film was released on September 26, 2014 in the United States and earned $12.5 million from 3,236 theaters in its first opening night, including the $1.45 million it earned from 2,693 screens from Thursday night showings. On the second day, the film earned $13.5 million and $8.1 million on the third day. Its opening day is the third biggest for Washington, trailing behind American Gangster, $15.8 million, and Safe House, $13.6 million. On its opening weekend, the film earned $34.1 million, 10,860 per theater, and debuted at number 1 at the box office. The film broke several records at the box office during its opening weekend, including the biggest R-rated debut of September, surpassing Jackass number 2 record, $29 million, the biggest IMAX opener of September, the biggest debut weekend gross for Antoine surpassing Olympus Has Fallen, $30 million, the 5th biggest domestic opening for Washington behind the aforementioned American Gangster, $43.6 million, Safe House, $40.2 million, and eventually behind its sequel, The Equalizer 2, $35.8 million, and The Magnificent Seven, $35.7 million. It was also the 4th biggest for a film released in September. It earned $3.3 million from 352 IMAX theaters. Audiences for the debut weekend of the film were 52% male and 48% female, with 65% of ticket buyers over 30 years old. The Equalizer earned $17.8 million overseas from 65 territories from 4,500 screens during its opening weekend, with $1.4 million of the gross coming from 137 IMAX theaters. The film broke several September openings record in various territories, including the UK, Netherlands, Israel, and Egypt. Top openings include the UK, $2.9 million, Russia, $2.7 million, Mexico, $1.4 million, Brazil, $1.3 million, United Arab Emirates, $875,000, and Malaysia, $650,000. Showings from Village Roadshow markets grossed an estimate $2.4 million, with top openings including Australia, $1.9 million, New Zealand, $180,000, and Singapore, $300,000. Critical response. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, The Equalizer has an approval rating of 61% based on 206 reviews, with an average rating of 5.7/10. The site's critical consensus reads, "The Equalizer is more stylishly violent than meaningful, but with Antoine Fuqua behind the cameras and Denzel Washington dispensing justice, it delivers." At Metacritic, which assigns a weighted average rating, the film received an average score of 57 out of 100 based on 41 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on a scale ranging from A+ to F. Writing for RogerEbert.com, Susan Loschina gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, stating, "If The Equalizer lacks gravitas, it is fairly sturdy as far as pure entertainment goes, and this film acts as an origin story with an ending that suggests a new franchise is afoot." Common Sense Media gave an expert review of 3-star rating, with parents and kids giving an average of 4 stars. James Berardinelli of RealViews gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, positively commenting on the pacing, further describing that it is in no hurry to rush into things. For the Globe and Mail, Liam Lacey gave it 2.5 stars out of 4, welcoming the idea of sequels to The Equalizer, just to watch Denzel finding new ways of getting even. Jeffrey McNabb for The Independent favorably compared the film to Washington's films with the late Tony Scott. However, McNabb criticized the plot, claiming that it makes no sense whatsoever. Nonetheless, he left a rating of 3 stars out of 5. Sequels: The Equalizer 2. Main article: The Equalizer 2. On February 24, 2014, 7 months before the release of the film, it was announced that Sony Pictures and Escape Artists were planning a sequel, with Richard Wenk penning the script. In early October 2014, Fuqua said in an interview that there would be a sequel to the film only if audiences and Denzel Washington wanted it. He stated McCall was an interesting character and that the sequel could have more of an international flavor. On April 22, 2015, Sony announced that a sequel would be made. In July 2017, Columbia Pictures announced that a portion of the filming would take place in the Brant Rock area of Marshfield, which took place over 2 weeks in November 2017. The Equalizer 2 was released in the US on July 20, 2018. The Equalizer 3. Main article: The Equalizer 3. In August 2018, Fuqua announced his plans to continue the film series. The filmmaker expressed interest in the plot taking place in an international setting. By January 2022, a third film was officially confirmed to be in development, with Denzel Washington and Fuqua returning. Principal photography was scheduled to commence in 2022. In June 2022, Dakota Fanning was cast in a supporting role. Written by Richard Wenk, the movie was produced by Todd Black, Jason Blumenthal, Steve Tisch, and Denzel Washington. The project is a co-production between Sony Pictures and Escape Artists Productions. The film was released theatrically on September 1, 2023. It's sometimes easy to forget that Denzel Washington's resume is as full of action thrillers as it is stocked with weighty dramas that cry out for awards. But The Equalizer is a high-impact reminder. Yes, it is part Man on Fire, part Taxi Driver, and outright based on the 80s TV series of the same name that starred Edward Woodward as a former covert operative turned guardian angel for helpless victims. If The Equalizer lacks gravitas, it is fairly sturdy as far as pure entertainment goes, and the actor takes his stealth vigilante as seriously as he does his Oscar-nominated performances in Flight or Malcolm X, pulling out that patented charm as well as considerable deadly force. Unlike many of those AARP card carriers in The Expendables, Denzel, at the ripe age of 59, is still dependable as a man who gets the job done when the meanies run amok, and who still draws a crowd at theaters when he does so. The Equalizer is especially noteworthy since it pairs Washington again with Antoine Fuqua, the director behind his Oscar-winning role in 2001's Training Day. But don't expect any King Kong ain't got shit on me histrionics in this caper. Washington's Robert McCall exudes a serene calm while living a low-profile Spartan-like solo existence as a clerk at a Boston-area Home Depot-like emporium. While his co-workers treat him with respect and count on him for advice, they also wonder about his past. He jokes with a couple young guys that he used to be a pip, meaning one of Gladys Knight's backup singer/dancers, and they almost buy it as Washington pulls off some smooth, old-school moves. His McCall was a pip, all right. The kind of pip who can pre-visualize a potentially explosive situation with brilliant Sherlock-level precision and dispatch would-be assailants with swift and often grisly violence. He also employs a watch timer to judge how long it will take to wipe out a threat. Usually it is within seconds. We sense he hasn't had to use these special skills for a while. Instead, this apparent insomniac spends his nights sipping tea while reading classics, including The Old Man and the Sea, Don Quixote, and The Invisible Man, titles that all comment on his current status, in an all-night diner that Edward Hopper would appreciate. But he soon will be called upon to pull his fighting skills out of hibernation after meeting a sweet but wounded teen call girl who hangs out at the restaurant between clients. What could be an uncomfortable relationship between retired killer and an underage prostitute who goes by the name Terry is sensitively handled. And it helps that Chloë Grace Moretz keeps her Moppet's precocious sexuality in check and instead makes a sincere connection with this lonely widower, even revealing her dreams to be a singer. But when she doesn't show up for her usual late-night dessert after a brutal beating by her Russian pimp has landed her in the hospital, McCall is ready to return to duty. From there, it is a game of cat and mouse as Washington hunts down the perpetrator and his thugs at a Russian restaurant. Part of the fun, if you want to call it that, is how the baddies always underestimate him and pay quite the price in doing so. Let's just say you might regard corkscrews in a whole new way after this ugly confrontation. Of course, there is a Mr. Big above the pimp, a gangster ironically named Teddy, whose torso is like a Sistine Chapel for satanic images. Marton Csokas sneers with sardonic relish and gives us someone truly hissable to root against, especially as it becomes apparent how deeply these Eastern European no-goodniks are ingrained in corrupt activity in the U.S. Meanwhile, Teddy's boss is eager to locate the mystery Avenger who is knocking off his workers and undermining his lucrative businesses. Fuqua likes to turn the act of violence into a sort of crude ballet, complete with repeated images of flowing water, as if washing evil away. All that is fine, although it keeps the Equalizer from being as lean and mean as it could be. While some might decry the ludicrous showdown that unfolds in the darkened aisles of McCall's megastore workplace, I got a kick out of watching Washington turn everyday hardware supplies into lethal weaponry. Then again, I have been a fan of mayhem occurring in a place of commerce ever since Dawn of the Dead's climactic zombies versus humans battle that takes place inside of a mall. Basically, the Equalizer is an average Joe blue-collar version of a comic book Avenger, secretly stalking those responsible for abusing and preying upon innocent citizens. And this film acts as an origin story with an ending that suggests a new franchise is afoot. It might not be bad for Washington to stay in the action game in a series that at least acknowledges those who qualify for a senior discount can be crusaders too. With the current vogue for aging action heroes, Liam Neeson, The Expendables, more recently Kevin Costner, it's easy to forget that Denzel Washington has been doing this forever. Or a decade or so anyway, ever since his ex-CIA officer John Creasy tore up half of Mexico in Tony Scott's Man on Fire. Here he reunites with another former collaborator, Antoine Fuqua, with whom he won an Oscar for Training Day, to play former Black Ops commando Robert McCall. And this time, the nation that needs to watch out is Russia. The Equalizer is a remake of the 80s TV series that starred Edward Woodward as a sort of refined Charles Bronson, taking out street scum with a Walther PPK and a stiff upper lip. This film begins in similar territory with Washington's McCall volunteering to assist a young prostitute called Lena, Chloë Grace Moretz, who's been bloodily assaulted by her pimp. McCall has come to know Lena as part of his meticulous daily routine. He has a smoothie in the morning, gets on the bus to work, is a cheery advisor to young colleagues at a DIY superstore, then returns for dinner in a local diner that really should pay Edward Hopper some royalties. It's there that he chats with Lena, sharing his vaguely hippie-ish wisdom, mind, body, spirit, and plowing through classic works of literature. He's organized to the point of mania, holding himself together for the memory of his dead wife. It's a small drama with a vague air of menace, and it's all quite compelling. Then McCall heads to a well-appointed private bar and takes out Lena's assailants in all of 28 seconds, putting a corkscrew to effective use in the process, and things go entirely to pot. The pimps are, naturally, the lowest orders of a massive Russian crime syndicate who trade in everything from people to oil. The organization is headed by a man called Pushkin, who sends his enforcer, Teddy, to tie things up. Soon enough, dozens of people are being blown up, shot dead, and having their testicles shoved in their mouths. There are two problems with this turn of events. Firstly, there's the desensitization to violence chestnut as Teddy, a just about convincing Marton Csokas, starts popping people with ever more lurid brutality. Secondly, there's the even older chestnut of how the audience suspends disbelief as the toughest and most tooled-up killers east of the Danube get laced by a man who can remember the moon landings. Fortunately for Fuqua, this ain't just any old 59-year-old. Denzel is so cool, so made of pure nails, he can make even the most preposterous action scene feel thrilling. But Denzel's strength is also his weakness. He's so convincing at being tougher than everyone else that we never get that end of the second act moment where it looks as if everything is lost. Instead, he just takes a quick trip to a country house. The Equalizer has the unique displeasure of being a total bore and yet completely over the top. Based on the CBS television series, 1985-89 of the same name, the story follows a former CIA agent who becomes a do-gooder for hire. The film was directed by Training Day Helmer Antoine Fuqua, who transformed the material into a bloodbath, not unlike his recent hit Olympus Has Fallen. Denzel Washington takes on the character originated by Edward Woodward, and it's a thankless role where Washington's considerable talents are put to use disposing of bad guys with power tools, while the actor's cool composure never breaks the character's brooding presence. Audiences who loved Tony Scott's Man on Fire, which featured Washington killing countless villains in an over-edited music video presentation, will feel right at home in this stylistically inconsistent mess. Screenwriter Richard Wenk, the Mechanic remake, The Expendables 2, alternates between scenes of ham-fisted character development and grotesque displays of violence. Bostonian Robert McCall has been transformed into a fussy bookworm whose days are spent pushing lumber at Home Mart. Apparently, Home Depot wanted nothing to do with this, and spends his nights at a 24/7 diner where he straightens his silverware, reads classical literature, and talks to the film's resident hooker with a heart of gold, Terry, Chloë Grace Moretz. Instead of driving a Jaguar as he did on the TV show, the character rides the bus and carries a prevailing case of OCD. Plotting scenes where Washington's affable McCall interacts with his fellow Home Mart employees, including a heavyset coworker, Johnny Scortis, whom McCall helps pass a security guard exam, drag on. The film develops McCall as a quiet, intelligent Good Samaritan, perhaps in anticipation of bloodshed to follow, as the viewer grows restless. After about 30 minutes or more, this slow-burning actioner starts to crackle, and that time spent developing McCall as a precise man gives way to contrasting scenes where he unloads his violent exactitude. When Terry ends up in the hospital, having been beaten by her handlers, McCall visits their club and dispenses with the lot in a grisly fashion, using knives, guns, a corkscrew, and even a shot glass to eye-gouging effect. Turns out they were Russian gangsters involved in an intricate network of organized crime, and their Moscow-based crime lord sends enforcer Teddy, Marton Csokas, a New Zealand-born actor who's played all sorts of Eurotrash over the years, to investigate. Teddy comes covered in tattoos and hissing villainous orders to no end of incompetent goons and corrupt cops on his payroll, all incapable of finding McCall. And once McCall finds out who Teddy is, and who Teddy works for, thanks to his old agency pals, Melissa Leo and Bill Pullman, McCall resolves to unleash hell. When the film goes into full-action movie mode, Fuqua's darkly lensed, atmospheric presentation becomes a grim and gory procession of explosions and death. Not that we can really tell what's going on. Cinematographer Mauro Fiore tries to evoke the rusty wash of David Fincher's Alien 3 throughout, and that prevalent darkness, along with scattershot editing by John Refuah, at times makes the shot-by-shot logic incomprehensible. The final showdown in Home Mart splatters onto the screen with a number of schlocky deaths, where McCall uses a variety of power tools and home improvement equipment to dispose of Teddy's body count gang. Barbed wire, a tree trimmer, a power drill, and a nail gun all come in handy, yet leave us wondering what McCall has against your garden variety gun. The barbarism on display seems so out of place in a film that, in its first hour, tried to build a credible character study through some slow-moving, almost poignant scenes. But then, that's the illusion an actor of Washington's caliber can create. He can turn his crooked detective from Training Day into an Oscar-winning performance, and he can make The Equalizer seem better than it really is. Without Washington, this would be an unwatchable disaster, and everyone else but him seems to understand that they're based on a TV show drivel, like Csokas, who's only a little less cartoonish here than he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Fuqua, especially, delivers a product divided by its laborious pacing and its more commercially attuned mean streak. The loud, uncharacteristic music played over slow-motion sequences of violent acts seems more attuned to a music video. Add a CGI downpour from Home Mart's sprinkler system, and you have a film that over-stylizes violence and tries to find its character in long, tedious stretches, exploring McCall's fastidious routine. And at 131 minutes, Fuqua punishes his audience with cliches and dull subplots, when really all he's done is give us a slaughterhouse with an interesting facade. There are two problems with this turn of events. Firstly, there's the desensitization to violence. Chestnut as Teddy, just about convincing Marton Csokas, starts popping people with ever more lurid brutality. Secondly, there's the even older chestnut of how the audience suspends disbelief is the toughest and most tooled-up killers east of the Danube get laced by a man who can remember the moon landings. Fortunately for Fuqua, this ain't just any old 59-year-old. Denzel is so cool, so made of pure nails, he can make even the most preposterous action scene feel thrilling. But Denzel's strength is also his weakness. He's so convincing at being tougher than everyone else that we never get that end of the second act moment where it looks as if everything is lost. Instead, he just takes a quick trip to a country as Maul returns, refreshed to single-handedly overturn an oligopoly. A film that had started by engaging with issues of aging and loss has forgotten such petty concerns entirely. Maybe they'll be remembered again when McCall returns for a sequel, which this film is obviously quite determined to set up. I can't say that I'm surprised or disappointed by the end result of The Equalizer, directed by the competent if nondescript Tuan Fuqua. Training Day Olympus has fallen. I wasn't expecting it to set my world on fire, but I was expecting it to be better than ... this. It's a lousy move, a one rung below an interesting failure in which Denzel Washington is actually its biggest problem. He is miscast in acting as much as an executive as a star. Denzel Washington carries a different type of energy than that of The Equalizer. Where Denzel is intelligent and a little grim, this movie is ridiculous, so it needs a lighter touch. Patrick mentioned in a heavy action column way back the concept of the other, which is, I'm paraphrasing, essentially a larger-than-life presence who is an outlier, someone uniquely different than everyone else. Denzel Washington is not that The Equalizer should have been played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, or Steven Seagal. It's their type of movie. It's not Man on Fire. I thought this especially during The Equalizer's endless climax inside a home art. The movies stand in for Home Depot, where Denzel's character takes out a endless string of bad guys utilizing power tools and other home and garden equipment. This sequence should play like the end of Commando, but instead it feels similar to the dock sequence in Batman Begins with Washman jumping out of the shadows. The tone is off. We have a ridiculous story trying to be gritty. The plot in brief: Robert McCall, Denzel. Washington is trying to lead a quiet life and leave his mysterious past behind him. McCall fills his days with a regimen that includes visiting a local diner late every night, having a cup of tea and reading a book. At the diner, Mikkel meets Chloë Grace Moretz, a young girl who is a prostitute for a ring run by local Russian gangsters. Knowing he has to help her, and he's the only one who can, Mikkel chooses to exact vengeance against the employers who abuse her. The movie is not without its charms. Some of it actually works, which makes its march downfield into shitty town all the more disappointing. The opening 30 minutes, where we get to know Robert Mikkel, is well done with nice touches, such as the fact that he's reading his way through the 100 books you need to read before you die, and that he's mildly OCD about his place settings and tea bags. There is a series of diner scenes that open the movie used to establish the relationships between Mikkel and Terry, which are all excellent. Denzel Washington has a way of elevating the work of the actors he shares scenes with, and it's definitely the case with Moretz. She's rarely been this good. I think it's just something about diners. Have you ever noticed that 95% of scenes that take place in diners are good scenes? Must be the Formica. It's an elevator of acting. I mentioned that the movie is one rung below an interesting failure, and I mean that because while the movie more or less sucks, it has interesting elements. I thought it was neat that the Bill Pullman and Melissa Leo characters have their roles reversed, where Leo is Washington's old chum and Pullman is basically the supportive wife. It doesn't lead anywhere, but the effort is admirable. I also found The Equalizer to have an interesting spin on the superhero genre. A big portion of the reason Leo's character is on hand is so she can acknowledge that Mikkel is essentially asking her permission to be the Equalizer again. It reminded me of Peter Parker's existential plight in Spider-Man 2, or the speech from David Carradine at the end of Kill Bill, where he extols on how Superman is Superman pretending to be Clark Kent. In this case, Mikkel is the Equalizer, and not the man trying to leave his past behind. He does what he does because it's in his DNA. Figuratively, to do what he does because he can. The superhero motif is also supported by an interesting shot midway through the movie featuring the Equalizer's main villain, played by Marton Csokas, who is filmed upside down momentarily so that it looks like he's an evil tattooed presence flying over the city, ready to swoop down on people like a vulture. This raises a question I have for you all. What movie do I review here? The one that sucks in, the actual experience of watching it, or the one that lives on in my mind after seeing it because it has some interesting elements? I think judging both equally is the answer, but it's tough because one should weigh more heavily than the other. I think movies are primarily trying to make you feel as opposed to think, so the experience means more. That being said, The Equalizer is sludge to get through. I was bored. It's lazy and mindless. The movie is over the top in a way where it's just a slow retreat into violence for the sake of violence, but not dealt with in a fun way. It's all heavy-handed, the pace, and endless. It's not entertaining in the way that great trash can be. Sigh. There's a scene about 2/3 of the way into the movie where Denzel walks away from an explosion, and it's so ludicrous that it made me pause for a minute and think, this is the guy from Philadelphia and Malcolm X. Is he officially in his Joseph Keaton Dr. Phibbs phase? I wanted to scream out, no, it's such a waste of talent. The Equalizer is all about its marketing. It's based on an IP people know and can make the studio and its star a bunch of movie. It's a product. It's made by executives and not artists. And I'm including producer Denzel Washington in that critique. At the last time I saw Denzel Washington, he was drunk, disheveled, and not doing well at all in flight. I missed two guns. So for me, The Equalizer brings him back to full badass mode, and then some loosely based on the 1980s TV series. A very loosely at The Equalizer stars Washington as Robert Mikkel, a man with a mysterious past who works during the day at something called Home Mart, which is really just Home Depot in disguise. Mikkel spends his night sitting up late in a local diner reading classic literature. And it's there that he befriends a local Russian hooker, Chloë Grace Moretz. Trying but still not quite grown up yet, whom he discusses said books with. When she is beaten senseless by her pimp, MCL decides to do something about it. You can guess what happens from there, and you'd probably be right. You see, MCL is a man with a past, who used to work for a government agency, doing things he'd rather forget. But Moretz's plight stirs his old self out of its slumber. Washington may be as commanding a presence as ever, but the Equalizer generates almost no suspense in either its character revelations or its plot minations. The movie follows the same grim, predictable path as so many of its kind, in which a righteous loner must make a stand against a shady or evil organization of some kind. In this case, Chloe's pimp is just one small part of a Russian criminal enterprise that has its claws sunk into Boston and is personified by the dapper enforcer Teddy Marton Csokas, who is shipped over from Moscow to find out who's gumming up the works. The movie's version of McCall is in some ways less complicated than the TV edition personified by Edward Woodward for 4 seasons. He's a widower, while Woodward's McCall was divorced and he has no children, at least as far as we know. While Woodward had a son who wanted to get into his line of work as well, the TV Equalizer drove a Jag. This one takes a bus. And did I tell you that the new one has OCD? That's why he opens and closes a door several times and arranges his tableware just so every night before having tea. But the Washington model has the same nasty skill set as Woodward when it comes to dispatching bad guys. A lethal talent that seems to be peculiar to men in their late 50s and early 60s. As Liam Niss can also attest, the Equalizer could almost fit into Nissan's recent run of generic action thrillers by virtue of Richard Wank's screenplay, which sets up a few potentially interesting ideas, like the OCD thing, and then just as quickly discards them. Wank does the same with supporting characters after she is hospitalized. Moretz disappears for almost the rest of the movie, while the Hallmark employee Johnny Scriptus, whom McCall helps ace the test for security guard, also pops conveniently in and out only when needed. This is all about getting to the stuff people are paying for, even if it takes a while for Wankin director Antoine Fuqua to get there. McCall laying waste to an office full of Russian gangsters. MCL taking out a pair of sleazy, corrupt cops. And finally, MCL taking on even more Russians who come out of the woodwork like ants without even breaking a sweat. No matter how many Russians show up, MCL always comes out on top. And it's Washington's impassive yet still undeniably charismatic screen persona that gets the viewer through the increasingly dreary carnage. He's essentially playing a superhero. Although Marvel would never let Iron Man or Captain America wallow in the hard argor and sadism that McCall generates, most salaciously in an extended battle at home art during which our man uses every power tool at his disposal to bloody dismantle his opponents. I hope he at least got the employee discount when he paid for it all the next day. But even watching Washington in full warrior mode can't quite save the proceedings from there by the numbers progression. Washington and Fuqua last teamed on Training Day, a much more complex film. And while Fuqua can stage his action scenes effectively and even stylishly, although some of them are a bit too underlit for my taste, he doesn't bring anything new to the table, and neither does his star. Washington can play this role in his sleep, and it's a credit to his talent that he's still hard to resist, even if he is literally just walking through a lot of the movie. His co-stars don't fare quite as well. Moretz, as we hinted earlier, would get guarded at any club she tried to enter. While Csokas fluctuates wildly between controlled menace and over-the-top Bondian supervillain, David Harbour seems perpetually sweaty, exhausted, and belligerent as a cop working for the Russians, while Melissa Leo unfortunately gets the Basil exposition role as a former agency exec whom McCall visits late in the film to have the story explained to him. None of this is necessarily bad. It's just so overly familiar that it generates almost no reaction at all. The Equalizer is well crafted enough that it's not a terrible experience at the movies. It's just an empty one. There's nothing complicated or thought-provoking about McCall's actions, and he never questions himself. There is very little in the way of consequences for him either. By the time he's officially open for business, to help others, putting the TV show's famous ad not in a newspaper, but on Craigslist, it's not like he had to wrestle with the idea very much. Washington is capable of so much more. But perhaps as he approaches the age of 60 himself, he figured he'd better get himself some box office insurance. as tensibly a franchise launcher. The Equalizer plays like the third or fourth installment of one that's already on autopilot. I've been a bit busy, and I'm behind on my movie reviews and everything. Please bear with me as I go through the backlog of what I've watched and rewatched. Smile. Here's today's movie review on The Equalizer. Equalizer, starring Denzel Washington, delivers a gripping and intense thriller that pays homage to its 1985 TV predecessor while standing strong on its own. Washington portrays Robert McCall, a man with a mysterious past who seeks solace in a quiet life. However, when he encounters Terry, brilliantly portrayed by Chloë Grace Moretz, and witnesses her suffering at the hands of brutal Russian mobsters, McCall's resolve to stay out of trouble shatters. The film's strength lies in Washington's commanding performance as Maul, who effortlessly transitions from a mild-mannered retiree to a relentless force of justice. His character's inner turmoil and unwavering determination are portrayed with depth and conviction, drawing viewers into his quest for redemption and retribution. Director Antoine Fuqua masterfully crafts intense action sequences that keep audiences on the edge of their seats. From hand-to-hand combat to tactical showdowns, each scene is executed with precision and adrenaline-pumping energy. The pacing is relentless, mirroring MCL's relentless pursuit of justice. Grace Moretz's portrayal of Terry adds emotional depth to the narrative, serving as both a catalyst for McCall's return to action and a symbol of the innocent victims caught in the crossfire of criminal activity. Their dynamic provides a compelling emotional anchor amidst the chaos and violence. While Equalizer faces the challenge of living up to the legacy of its predecessor, it succeeds admirably, offering a fresh take on the vigilante genre. The film honors the spirit of the original series while carving out its own identity thanks to Washington's powerhouse performance and Fuqua's deft direction. Overall, Equalizer is a thrilling and satisfying cinematic experience that packs a punch from start to finish. Fans of the original series will appreciate the nods to its legacy, while newcomers will be drawn in by the gripping story and intense action. Equalizer proves that even in a crowded genre, there's always room for a standout film fueled by powerhouse performances and adrenaline-fueled action. The Equalizer has the unique displeasure of being a total bore and yet completely over the top. Based on the CBS television series 198589 of the same name, the story follows a former CIA agent who becomes a do-gatter for hire. The film was directed by Training Day, Fuqua, who transformed the material into a bloodbath, not unlike his recent hit, Olympus Has Fallen. Denzel Washington takes on the character originated by Edward Woodward, and it's a thankless role where Washington's considerable talents are put to use. Composure never breaks the character's brooding presence. Audiences who love Tony Scott's Man on Fire, which featured Washington killing countless villains in an over-edited music video presentation, will feel right at home in this holistically inconsistent mess. Screenwriter Richard Wang, the Mechanic remake The Expendables 2, alternates between scenes of ham-fisted character development and grotesque displays of violence. Bonian Robert McCall has been transformed into a fussy bookworm whose days are spent pushing lumber at Home Mart. Apparently, Home Depot wanted nothing to do with this and spends his nights at a 47 diner where he, with a heart of gold, Terry Chloë Grace Moretz. Instead of driving a Jaguar, as he did on the TV show, the character rides the bus and carries a prevailing case of OCD. Plotting scenes where Washington's affable MCL interacts with his fellow Home Mart employees, including a heavy-set coworker, Johnny Scriptus, whom McCall helps pass a security guard exam, drag on. The film develops McCall as a quiet, intelligent Good Samaritana, perhaps in anticipation of bloodshed to Fala as the viewer grows restless. After about 30 minutes or more, this slow-burning actioner starts to crackle, and that time spent developing McCall as a precise man gives way to contrasting scenes where he unloads his violent exactitude. When Terry ends up in the hospital having been beaten by her handlers, McCall visits their club and dispenses with the lot in a grisly fashion, using knives, guns, a corkscrew, and even a shot glass to eye-gouging effect. Turns out, They were Russian gangsters involved in an intricate network of organized crime, and there, Moscow-based crime lord sense enforcer Teddy Marton Csokas, a New Zealand-born actor who's played all sorts of Euro trash over the years to investigate. Teddy comes covered in tattoos and hissing villainous orders to no end, and of incompetent goons and corrupt cops on his payroll, all incapable of finding MCL. And once McCall finds out who Teddy is and who Teddy works for, thanks to his old agency pals Melissa Leo and Bill Pullman, McCall resolves to unleash hell. When the film goes into full-action movie mode, Fuqua was darkly lensed. Atmospheric presentation becomes a grim and gory procession of explosions and death. Not that we can really tell what's going on. Cinematographer Mauro Fiore tries to evoke the rusty wash of David Fincher's Alien 3 throughout, and that relevant darkness, along with scattershot editing by John Fuqua at times makes the shot-by-shot logic incomprehensible. The final showdown and home art splatters onto the screen with a number of schlicky deaths where McCall uses a variety of power tools and home improvement equipment to dispose of Teddy's body count gang. Barbed wire, a tree trimmer, a power drill, and a nail gun all come in handy, yet leave us wondering what McCall has against your garden variety gun. The barbarism on display seems so out of place in a film that in its first hour tried to build a credible character study through some slow-moving, almost poignant scenes. But then that's the illusion an actor of Washington's caliber can create. He can turn his crooked detective from Training Day into an Oscar-winning performance, and he can make The Equalizer seem better than it really is. Without Washington, this would be an unwatchable disaster. And everyone else but him seems to understand that they're based on a TV show Dry, who's only a little less cartoonish here than he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Fuqua especially delivers a product divided by its laborious pacing and its more commercially attuned mean streak. The loud, uncharacteristic music played over slow-motion sequences of violent act seems more attuned to a music video. Add a CGI downpour from home art sprinkler system, and you have a film that over-stylizes violence and tries to find its character in long, tedious stretches, exploring McCall's hideous routine. And at 131 minutes, Fuqua punishes his audience with cliché copyright-s and dull subplots, when really all he's done is give us a slaughterhouse with an interesting fight till the Section 8. Perhaps the best thing about The Equalizer is how long it takes to reveal what everyone watching it knows from the start. Directed by Antoine Fuqua and starring Denzel Washington, the movie was inspired by a 1980s television series about an elite CIA assassin played by Edward Woodward, who found a second career as a freelance vigilante specializing in payback and in preemptive violence in defense of the innocent. Each bit of information in the previous sentence, to say nothing of the trailer, and advertisements say, is a clue that Mr. Washington's character, Robert McCall, is not the bookish, solitary Boston guy he at first seems to be. Bob, who works at a Home Depot-like building supply store, is a widower with meticulous habits and friendly relations with most of the people he meets. A ready source of self-help catchphrases that would sound silly coming from anyone other than Mr. Washington. He is a mentor to a younger Sea Orker, Johnny Skrish. When insomnia hits, Bob repairs to a 24-hour diner where he drinks tea, reads classic novels, and makes a volular small talk with Alina, a young prostitute whose street name is Terry Clagrace Moretz. Eventually, he's going to kill someone, of course. But before he does, The Equalizer is disarmingly quiet, almost as if it were committed to remaining the low-key, lower-middle-class character study that nobody in the theater has bought a ticket to see. And then Bob takes out a room full of Russian mobsters. And the fun which is to say the escalating bloodshed, begins in earnest. That first batch of bad guys, gored with corkscrews, brained with paper weights, and sent off into the next world with anything else that comes to hand, were guilty of hurting Alina. It turns out that they sit at the bottom of a pyramid of depravity that reaches all the way to a man named Pushkin back in Moscow. Thinking that rival gangs might be moving in on his territory, Mr. Depushin Vladimir Kulich sends enough evil mayhem to justify more righteous brutality on Bob's part. Daddy's elegantly tailored suits hide a chest full of prison tattoos, and his sneering sadism and Phidias diction mark him out for an especially painful death. Though the rules of the genre dictate that we'll have to wait for it once he shows up. Painful death is pretty much all the Equalizer has on its mind. Alina, the innocent, vulnerable pretext for all the killing, pretty much disappears, though one of her colleagues, Haley Bennett, takes a turn in the victim role. Violence against women is handled discreetly, but the men stomp, stab, shoot, and bludge on one another with showy abandon and an almost erratic intensity. Bobat might not be his real name. May is chaste, and his motives are pure. Though in his past he might have done some of the usual vaguely alluded to terrible things, his decency nicences both his extreme brutality and our enjoyment of it. We can persuade ourselves that we are watching the spectacle of enacted justice rather than the sentimentalization of a homicidal sociopath. Really though, I'm splitting ethical hairs. Mr. Washington is with Liam Neeson, one of our leading middle-aged action heroes, a rugged avenger whose craft and discipline endow even exploitative nonsense like this with a center of gravity. For his part, Mr. Fuqua, while not the world's most subtle filmmaker, directs the action sequences with bluntness and clarity and effectively uses his star as an oasis of calm in a jumpy, nasty universe. I can't help feeling a little bit sorry for some of the bad guys, though. Not Pushkin and Teddy and the mid-level pimp who beats up Alina in a movie like this. Due process for guys like that is properly supplied by a nail gun or jagged piece of glass. This may be the place to note that Bob, who never carries his own firearm, has a MacGyver or do I mean MacGruber level of ingenuity when it comes to weaponizing ordinary household objects. But what about the lower-ranking muscle, the bald dudes with tattoos, who have to open the doors of the black SUVs and throw the first punches at a man they have no way of knowing is really an elite super assassin? Were they warned about this in the job interview? Do they have health insurance? They're really just working stiffs too. And the way they're treated seems a little unfair. Antoine Fuqua's adaptation of the beloved, at least by me, 1980s television series, The Equalizer bears almost no resemblance to the show except for a loose setup and the name of the protagonist. It offers even less in the way of surprise, but that doesn't stop it from being nuts and awesome. And as much as I enjoyed the B show when I was a kid, if this was on my TV now, I would tune into each and every damn episode. The film continually ramps up to such lunatic heights that eventually the protagonist in true action movie form slowly walks away. From a full-size tanker, he just blew without even seeming to notice. Now, walking away from an explosion is standard stuff, as satirized as it is in every way imaginable, from spoofs to car commercials. But the way the film approaches this moment is indicative of the overall manic approach. It's in the details and how the film takes things to previous unimagined heights of lunacy where the Equalizer sets itself apart. Not only does Denzel Washington's Robert McCall, a role taken over from the now-deceased Edward Wynward, cause a single massive explosion, when the chain reaction of blasts triggered by that explosion almost engulfs him, he still doesn't pick up the pace from practically the first frame. This is going to end in a violent clash inside the Home Depot hardware store where McCall works. Again, that's to be expected. What you don't see coming, however, is that the movie combines the showdown in a place with lots of things that can be weapons trope with the slow-motion rainstorm showdown. I don't want to say any more about it, but if you're asking yourself, aren't they inside? The answer is yes. Yes, they are still inside of a building. Also, one of the villains may be the devil. So, there's that. We'll get there eventually. McCall lives a bare Spartan existence in a working-class Boston neighborhood. He's helpful and pleasant, teasing his young slacker co-workers that he used to be a pip, as in one of Gladys Knight's backup singers, helping a chubby clerk trained to become a security guard, and is generally an all-around good dude. Still, as friendly as he is, there's a level of remove of distance between himself and everyone else. No one really knows anything about him. He has OCD-like tendencies, and something in his past haunts him to the point where he just never sleeps. Instead, he spends his nights at 24-hour coffee shop where he reads classic literature, organizes silverware, and banters with Elena, Chloë Grace Moretz, or Terry as she's professionally known, a young prostitute who keeps similar hours and has dreams of becoming a singer. Elena exists in the script as little more than an inciting incident and disappears in short order. This isn't a story of connection. This is a story of revenge and justice and setting things right. And when Robert sees her get beaten by her Russian pimp, he can no longer sit back and idly watch. His inner man of action takes over. First off, he murders an entire room full of connected Russian gangsters without batting an eye or even pausing. And right out of the blue, the Equalizer shifts gears and becomes a violent, borderline gory film. You don't take out the East Coast hub of the Russian mob without someone noticing. And that's where Marton Csokas' Teddy comes in, sent by his bosses cut through the Boston underworld, leaving a swath of bodies behind him. On the surface, he's there to find answers, but he's more delivering a message than anything else. Russian criminals tend to write their histories on their bodies in tattoos like a resume. And Teddy, despite an oddly cuddly name, is no different. Through this imagery, devil horns, burning skulls, broken crosses, twisted religious symbolism etched into his skin, not to mention the extreme close-ups and pseudo-psychedelic wuku with shoots of shirtless. You have to ask yourself, wait, is he supposed to be the devil? It's only one scene that introduces this idea, but once it's on the table, it casts a different shadow over everything that comes afterwards. Though it fades into the background as you gain distance, it provides the story with the slight elevation in scope and scale, heightening the already present good versus evil dynamic, but giving it a near biblical feel for a moment, but just a moment. One thing that's easy to appreciate about The Equalizer is that as opposed to most films in this general vicinity, it never explicitly spells out McCall's background. He obviously comes from a military and intelligence background. After a throwaway appearance by Melissa Leo and Bill Pullman, you're fairly certain it's the CIA, but never 100% explicit. It's possible he just had dealings with them and allies in the agency, but it doesn't actually matter. To be honest, the most interesting part about his background isn't the background, and no matter what story they gave him, you would have heard it before. It's what happens to him after he reverts back to his old way of life. A way of life he obviously took great pains to remove himself from. The deeper back in he gets, the less his compulsive behaviors surface. Viewed through this filter, McCall's story is a voyage of self-discovery, of a man returning to himself, allowing himself to be who he really truly is. The violence comes so natural to Hiei, you never see him train or maintain his skills like in other movies. But when he needs them, they're back in the snap of your finger, so that it's obviously always been there, hidden barely out of sight, just below the surface. You come to understand that the only way he can control these tendencies is through constant vigilance, through the obsessive control of every exterior element of his life. His OCD isn't a reaction to his past, it's a regulatory mechanism. He can't even allow himself the freedom to sleep because he's afraid of what might happen when he relinquishes the reins. However, after dismantling that first crew of Russians, which he knows can't possibly be a one-off, he sleeps like a damn baby at the weird kind of peace. For his part, Washington is in that full-on badass mode he's been in lately. There's a lot of talk of Liam Neeson's later career action renaissance, but with movies like Two Guns, Safe House, and even Book of Eli to an extent, a 59-year-old Denzel still kicks a healthy amount of ass. In The Equalizer, he never tries to be intimidating, and even after you see firsthand what he's capable of, you're never frightened of him. He's got a code, and if you're not hurting innocent people, he has no beef with you. What posturing he does primarily with Daddy isn't so much about swagger and who has a bigger dick. It's more, you know who I am. You know what I'm capable of. So if you choose to engage me, you know what to expect. There's a non-nonsense, matter-of-fact air to Robert that sets him apart from other action leads. He doesn't have anything to prove. There's no chip on his shoulder, and in reality, it's not even personal. He's just standing up for the little guy, and there are many times when he's downright charming about it. The Equalizer is not a lightning-fast actioner. This is a steady, gradual build that culminates in a tense, damn near dialogue-free third act, where the film feels like the time for words has come and gone, and now is the time to get down to the serious business of Up. Fuqua does his job along the way, though, keeping things interesting to look at. His camera is almost always moving, always in motion, panning, pulling, and in rare cases, flipping you completely over a character's head. This gets a bit tricky when you just want to show a close-up of a man alone, sitting in a coffee shop, contemplating life, and this motion is so ubiquitous that it's most noticeable in the rare instances where it's absent, where the frame is finally static. Within this, he adds stylized flourishes to the violent encounters. Watching McCall dismantle the room full of Russians in a flurry of near video game manic action is fun, but you start to worry that it's all going to be like that. This trend actually abates as the movie progresses, thankfully, and settles down into a much more practical, vicious approach. A lot of people are going to dismiss The Equalizer as just another action movie, and it's not going to be for everyone, but there's much more than that going on. It's familiar to be sure. Nothing the plot does will surprise you in any way. It's like they cut and pasted the story from any of dozens of other movies you've seen before. But at the same time, while there's nothing particularly interesting happening on a surface level, a subtext of strangeness runs below the action and hanging over the top. There's such an insane action genre one-upsmanship going on that it's difficult not to be engaged and even harder to look away. So, I am going to begin this review with a confession. I have never seen the first Equalizer film, nor the TV series it is based off. Indeed, I didn't even know there was a TV series until I saw it in the credits. To add to this, I was not even planning to go see The Equalizer today, so I didn't have the presence to watch the first film before going in. So, as I was going in, I thought I should at least read through the synopsis. Just reading what happened made me truly wonder how I missed it. However, film history is full of sequels that don't live up to the original. So, let's take a look at a world power does not protect you. So to set the scene, we open on a train making its way through the Turkish countryside to Istanbul. On the train, there is a little girl, her father, and a man reading a book. As the father walks to the bar, the man follows him and reveals that he is a man who fixes the wrongs that people in power think they could get away with. Say, a man stealing his daughter away from her mother. It is here that the man reveals himself to be Robert McCall Denzel Washington and gives the man a choice. Do the right thing or have the right thing forced upon him. 3 dead goons later, and the daughter is returned. For you see, McCall was an ex-CIA Black Ops who has gone into a sort of hiding with the death of his wife. In between giving people lifts, McCall tries to right the wrongs that he can find. But all of that goes away when the one linked to his past life, Susan Melissa Leo, is murdered while investigating the apparent murder-suicide of a deep-cover CIA asset. The first thing I really want to champion with this film is the pacing, which is one of the things that separates The Equalizer from its competitors. The film gives time for the characters and plot to breathe in between the different action set pieces. This is really important because it creates threads that help bind the world together and makes it feel like a real world with real people. Did the film need to spend time with the man contemplating whether or not he could get through the day without a drink, or the soldier going off to his first tour of duty? Well, number. But what it does is in those moments, it builds a world, a very real one that we live in. But just because it is real does not mean you can't skimp on the world building. Another bonus of this is that it helps build tension because we know who McCall is, his morals and drive. So from the moment those douchebag business guys put that poor lady into the car, you knew where it was going to end up because of this world building. The film actually takes quite a while to actually reveal its hand, but this actually works for it. When we look at the story proper, and because we are doing that, there will be spoilers ahead. Once the film gets into its plot proper, the first thing you notice is just how predictable the plot becomes. There are absolutely no shocks as to who the bad guy is, even without the casting kind of already giving the game away. Now, in a lesser film, this would be quite a problem because that's the only thing going for you. But not so here. The Equalizer fits into a group of films that feature retired or undercover former badasses who then act out their badassery to the unsuspecting criminals, spies, etc. that come after them. There are a lot of these types of films, and The Equalizer 2 is one of the better versions of this, fitting in between Rada and John Wick on the Ado Dam. Did that just happen? Spectrum part of this is the commitment of Denzel Washington to really sell the role. The man can command a scene with just a single stare. The action is edited quite fast, but in a way that you always know what is going on, with one of the more inventive car chases that I have seen in a while. Add to this a big props to the art and special visual effects departments from creating a hurricane and then shooting most of the third act in it, which must not have been a fun time on set at all. Also, all of those threads spun throughout the film all come to fruition in those last moments, and I am a brave enough man to admit it emotionally broke me. In the end, do we recommend The Equalizer 2? Yes, we do. The action is solid, the emotional beats have weight, and the strong acting and direction make up for some of the more overdone parts of the plot. Now, if you excuse me, I am now going to go find if any of the local streaming services have the first Equalizer because I want to see if McCall kills it henchmen one by one using booby traps constructed with items in the store. One is as crazy as it sounds. It's sad when I have to say that one of the best films I saw in August didn't even open until this weekend. But alas, director Antoine Fuqua and Denzel Washington have reunited to deliver one of the best TV-to-film adaptations with The Equalizer. When I saw the trailer, I was not impressed. It looked like another run-of-the-mill thriller with a convoluted-sounding plot and nothing to distinguish itself outside the names of Fuqua and Denzel. Thankfully, The Equalizer is a big old blast of badass that audiences are in dire need of. Robert McCall Washington lives a quiet life in Boston. His apartment is bare bones, and he works at the local home improvement store where he helps encourage his co-worker, Ralphie Johnny Scriptus, to lose weight in order to get the security job at work. Robert spends his nights with insomnia, watching the hours pass by at a local diner, reading books, and waxing philosophical with a teenage escort named Terry, Chloë Grace Moretz. When Terry ends up in the hospital, Robert goes to make a deal with her pimp, Slavi, David Moyer, and is left with no other choice but to kill everyone. Now, Robert has triggered a war against the Russian mob with their number one fixer, Teddy Martin, trying to find out who Robert really is, find him, and kill him. Perhaps the biggest surprise about The Equalizer is its attention to character. Fuqua's restrained direction helps build tension as we get to know Robert and actually care for his survival. That's something most action films rarely see these days, with shoot-first character, second attitude. Fuqua has also surrounded Washington with some great co-stars, Sabine Pullman and Melissa Leo, as friends from his former life. Leo is no stranger to The Equalizer's world, having guest starred on the original series. It's also a reunion for Leo and Fuqua, as she appeared in Olympus Has Fallen. Screenwriter Richard Wenk never comes right out and divulges McCall's past, but it becomes pretty clear as the film rolls, and us especially, during the big finale. Let's just say, never play Home Alone with a train killer in a Home Depot-type store. This whole sequence could also be looked at as a brilliant send-up of his early days directing Black Decker commercials. Washington continues to get more badass with each film, showing no signs of slowing down. And while they may not be aiming for the Academy Awards Anna back when Washington won for Training Dia, the two of them work so well together. I welcome any sequel they have to offer. That's something which is set up in the last scene. The Equalizer is one of the year's best thrillers. Do you remember the 1980s TV series The Equalizer, in which Edward Woodward played the mysterious former intelligence operative who did little private high vigilante jobs for people in trouble in New York City? No, perhaps you remember the super cool electronic theme music. It was written by Stuart Copeland of The Police. Still nothing. Never mind. Doesn't matter. If this movie wasn't entitled The Equalizer, you'd never guess it was meant to be a reboot of the series. That don't mean it ain't constructed of recycled junk. Nope, this is but one more artifact of the long stagnation of Hollywood, which has been remaking the same movies over and over and over again for the past 30 years. Denzel Washington's Two Guns flight. McCall is a former professional badass of some unnamed, at least at first sort, who clearly misses his past life as one does. We know this because even though he now works at a DIY big box store, he still lives his life with military precision, timing down to the second how long it takes him to eat his dinner. Hospital corners on the bed you could bounce a quarter off, etc. A bed he never sleeps in. Apparently, he can't sleep. You see, because even though fantasy alert, he seems happy with his minimum wage job, he isn't following his own philosophy of got to be who you are in this world, no matter what. He relates this to a you love this. A hooker with a heart of gold and the soul of an artist. Terry Chloë, Grace Moretz, If I Stay. Carrie, who also hangs out in the Edward Hopper Nighthawks diner, McCall always finds himself in the wee hours. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Now, the Boston that McCall exists in is a suspect of crime and corruption. Those cops whom the Russian mob doesn't have in its pockets are running protection rackets among the citizens they're meant to be actually protecting. But McCall doesn't even seem to notice, never mind, care until Terry gets beaten up by her Russian mobster pimp. Terry then all but disappears from the story because she has served all the purpose she needs to survey motivating a man and reinvigorating his spirit, by being violently abused. In fact, even her abusers will be more developed as characters than she ever is, and will get more screen time from the pimp and his gang, to the scent from Moscow fixer Martin's Sin City, A Dame to Kill, for the amazing Spider-Man 2, who will battle McCall once the game is on. It's somehow vitally important that we understand precisely how awful they are. You might think that simply saying international sex trafficker would do it, but it seems not. This is probably so that the movie can feel justified in McCall's grotesque position in how he takes them out one by one. It is a hard reality. You see that men are bad in all these diverse and perverse ways, so Hollywood is totally justified in barfing up another vigilante badass to clean up the world. Yan, you know what would be badass? A movie about international sex trafficking that didn't victimize women all over again. I would say that this is not a work worthy of director at One Training to Fuqua, except he's been making a lot of junk lately. His previous flick was the appalling die-hard wannabe at Diamer, Olympus Has Fallen for Pete's sake. There's nothing in the least bit surprising or unexpected or even mildly compelling here, broken bar, except maybe how there's neither enough drama, not enough action to satisfy fans of either genre, nor even fans of the hybrid action drama, and certainly nothing to justify the existence of an IMAX version of this movie. No, not even the slow-mo walk away from an explosion. The final outcome, even before the suggestion of a sequel, is in no dispute whatsoever, said in the MacGyver heaven of MCL's DIY store. The finale is a long, slow slog through nameless bad guy cannon fodder toward Anel offing Martin in some inventive way. Spoiler, it's not even all that inventive. Actually, unlike no other action movie ever. In his multiple decades as a movie star, Denzel Washington avoided franchises and balanced prestige work with the occasional action picture. Much like other older stars, the choice to become an old man action hero was compelling enough because such a terrific star was at the center. As a result, 2014's The Equalizer was a big enough hit to lead to Washington's first sequel, 2018's The Equalizer 2. I wasn't fond of the first, but the sequel was a miserable experience, sitting as one of Washington's career worst films. So now we have The Equalizer 3. And I'll say this, say it's a step up. Perhaps that's faint praise. And while I still wouldn't necessarily say I enjoyed this final installment, I can at least say it's the best of the three this time around. Washington's Robert McCall begins the film in Sicily. We literally open on the aftermath of a bloody battle, and McCall finishing off those who remain with the precision accuracy he's shown multiple times over in previous films. And yes, it's still very violent. However, a chance encounter leads to an injury, forcing McCall to recover in a small seaside town in southern Italy. Unfortunately, this film did not feature sea creatures from Luca befriending the retired DIA officer. Instead, we have McCall taking on the Sicilian mafia, who act like the grasshoppers to the helpless ants in this town trying to live peaceful lives. It's outright in its setup. Yet, it's hard not to be compelled by everything Washington does here. That's pure star charisma at this point, perhaps amplified by him being more of a fish out of water than the Boston setting of the previous films. The fact that McCall must spend a bit of time healing allows the film to take things a bit slower for a few stretches and let the setting do its work. Whether it's McCall's interactions with the town's favorite doctor, Enzo Ramo Giron, or how he gradually increases his intimidation tactics on the mafia, something brewing holds the audience between the brutal action sequences. And yes, things get pretty grisly for people who get in McCall's way. That partially comes from the other side of the plot, as things can't ever be too simple, much like the TV series that inspired this film franchise. You see, McCall has uncovered a drug terrorist operation that brings on more violent characters. To aid in all this, McCall sends an anonymous call to DIA agent Emma Collins, Dakota Fanning, allowing for a side plot of investigation to help close the walls around a powerful mafioso. The gimmick here is, of course, seeing the Man on Fire stars together again. Though any claim that this feels like an unofficial sequel is nonsense for any number of reasons. Fortunately, Washington and Fanning have a fun chemistry, allowing for another break-in, the tension. With that in mind, the dynamic here is no different than with anyone McCall interacts with. As the character is always the smartest, fastest, and deadliest person in the room under a different light, one could easily stack MCL up against any of the best slasher movie villains. The way he invades spaces stealthily, murders one person after another, and even makes an elaborate presentation out of it suggests he is a horror movie villain for the ages. And yes, under the circumstances of those films, we are supposed to be rooting for McCall to get the better of these bad guys and in the most severely violent ways possible. I have no reason to question the morality of this, because these movies don't present enough to get that attached to or take all that seriously. Instead, we have scenes where McCall is never in danger, as the film basically goes out of its way to tell us that each fight has ended with another victory for him before it even started. So as it stands, I'm more concerned about what the general takeaway is supposed to be. Director Antoine Fuqua returns once again, seemingly recharged in how to present this kind of movie. Not hurting is having the great cinematographer Robert Richardson shooting the film. Yes, a movie set in southern Italy can look good by default. Still, there is an effect of atmosphere on display, and the way this film charges up to visuals and music to indicate the sudden shifts in McCall's intentions at least allows for the pulpiness of it all to feel more fitting. But back to the question of what to get out of all this. Honestly, 3 entries in, and it seems clear these visceral vigilante action films have no intention of offering any more than what's advertised. Washington can put a nice face on it all, but these are shallow exercises in what movie stardom and style can get away with. I don't get much out of it, as Washington has done plenty of other stellar genre films that don't feel nearly as lazy, but I can see the appeal. Fortunately, this entry at least feels more agreeably forgettable. That may not be saying much, but as much as time has been on McCall's side, seems to be for me as well this time around. Notionally, based on a 1980s television series that made an unlikely U.S. star of The Wicker Man's Edward Woodward, The Equalizer reunites Denzel Washington with his training day director Antoine Fuqua for another bout of violent mayhem. Washington is doing his tacit no Avenger routine here. See also Man on Fire, The Book of Eli Safehouse, playing Robert McCall, a former government agent who has opted for a quiet life. MCL divides his time between a day job at a hardware store where he lectures his coworkers, including an appealing Johnny Scriptus, about the reading habits and night owl duties at a diner where he reads Hemingway, who else, and drinks tea. All this changes when circumstances and his innate call to heroism conspire to put him into conflict with the Russian mafia. Guess who prevails? As the teenage hooker whose mistreatment spurs McCall into action, Chloë Grace Moretz has little more than a glorified cameo, although she's to be commended for sporting no fewer than 3 different wigs in her 10 minutes of screen time, including a severe bob, which after Kick-Ass 1, 2, and If I Stay is clearly her style of choice. Jodie Foster's turn in Taxi Driver is an obvious reference point for the part, but the precocious Moretz lacks Foster's striking combination of ourness and innocence, and her roar with the stoic Washington never rings true as the chief heavy, rather amusingly named Teddy Martin, appears to be enjoying himself, although his accent doesn't seem ready to commit. The niceties of performance, though, are of little importance for a film that knows its audience as well as this one, and expectations for righteous carnage are more than met. One of the problems of the film, however, is that since McCall is written and played as an unassailable Superman, there is little suspense in the bountiful action. There is no real question of whether McCall will prevail, meaning viewer interest has to be held by the violent specifics of how he does so. Unlike, say, Batman's refusal to handle a gun, McCall's weariness of firearms doesn't seem to stem from a reluctance to kill. Instead, he dispenses summary executions with whatever is to hand, making for a panoply of stabbings, electrocutions, and garrings, including one with barbed wire, as well as a whistle-stop tour of alternate uses for hardware goods. Curiously, The Equalizer has a lot in common with 1980s slasher films, in which the attraction comes mainly from outlandish methods of murder rather than from conventional tension. If you imagine Jason as a righteous avenger who occasionally uttered aphorisms about body, mind, spirit, you wouldn't be far off. Like Man on Fire, 2004. The Equalizer also features an elaborate but rather ludicrous torture sequence that leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Although The Equalizer thankfully never approaches Man on Fire's exact blend of saccharine and splatter, mercifully. It's not all grim and gruesome at The Equalizer also features a man walks away from explosion scenes so wildly excessive, so insanely solemn, you wonder if anybody will ever be able to top it. Naomi Shane's production design is a pulpy Turtle Force 2, with a pleasingly surreal money-laundering complex and a Russian restaurant-cum mafia den that recalls David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises with the dial turned up to 11. At 131 minutes, The Equalizer delivers a supersized portion of which McCall himself would surely disapprove when the last of its 4 endings sets up a franchise that will presumably deliver more of the same. One can't help but hope it comes in a somewhat leaner package. Still, fans of stony glares, slow motion, and ultraviolence will be hanging out the bunting. Aficionados of Edward Woodward's Equalizer, who wrapped up each case inside of an hour and never stabbed anybody with a corkscrew, may have to look elsewhere. This film does not rate high for me. I find Denzel Washington more predictable than perhaps ever. For the most part, this film is classic Denzel action, humor, wit, solid good guy versus solid bad guy. The acting is decent, but this film is drawn out and reads more like 7 TV shows than a film. If you would prefer to simply know the potentially objectionable content and judge the quality for yourself, skip my next paragraph and go straight to the violence, sexuality, profanity section. Why I tired of this film before the first hour was over may well be because I've seen so much of Denzel's wit in other movies. His decisive and cunning macho dealings are well on par with that of Bruce Willis and Mel Gibson in their action roles. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether it is familiarity or just slow-moving scenes, I find Denzel predictable, and I find the scenes drawn out of painfully drawn out. There are some great build-ups, and then there are some more build-ups, and then more. This film had more ups and downs than the hydraulic arm of a Saudi oil pump. Every 25 minutes, I felt like I had watched another film. By the end, I felt like I had watched 7 films and been glued to my chair for 3 or more hours. That's quite a discrepancy for a 2-hour rig, an 11-minute film. I will admit that the first half of The Equalizer is better than the second. There were some very hopeful moments. It gave promise and dumped her head first on the floor. This film in its parts is good action. In its parts, it is dramatic and contains some witty one-liners. In its parts, it contains some solid motivations for justice and some cool effects. But no book or film or artwork is a bundle of parts. As a whole, this film embodies the term violence and revenge ad nauseum, Latin for until you puke, violence. Probably the most disturbing violence in the film is a woman being strangled. At least that's more frustrating for a man cough than seeing bad guys impaled by tree. Trimmers, nail guns, drills, and various implements of destruction, all of which and more exist in this film. Is the violence senseless? Well, it serves a purpose. It's always a just dessert situation. However, it is lengthy. It is at times 8-10 gory. It is drawn out. It is repetitive, exhaustive, a bit numbing, and a little tiresome. In fact, it extends almost comically beyond the plot, as if more a dreamlike portrayal of violence than one of experts in action. As a fan of the Bourne trilogy and Shooter, it takes no small amount of violence to produce such an opinion of me. In hindsight, particularly given the recent Queen Laddie Foot TV show variant, the first Washington Fuqua Equalizer flick was a solid thriller, marrying the director's stylish violence with Washington's innatable screen presence. It may have initially struggled to escape the shadow of the actor's insanely great resume, or indeed the far better Tony Scott Revenger, Man on Fire, itself based on a series of books, but cursed with a deviating ending that ensured that none of those further outings would see the light of day. Yet, hindsight does wonders, and in the wake of his Seven Wannable, The Little Things, The Magnificent Seven, or even the Equalizer's own first solid but distinctly unremarkable sequel, 2014's, The Equalizer feels like a refreshingly slick slice of entertainment. And, still pushing 70, the idea of the powerhouse Washington returning to do a second sequel seemed like a bit of a long shot, a bit of a take and three move for a man who has issued labeling and pigeonholing for basically his entire career. Yet, here we are with the second sequel to a franchise nobody was particularly asking for in the first place, facing down the barrel of a surprisingly strong third entry that once again perfectly combines Washington's commanding presence with some stylish brutality and provides a decent piece of entertainment, sat at top a fairly lackluster cinematic landscape, reaping the reward of extremely good box office timing. Shifting the format slightly, Equalizer 3 moves to Italy for its action and puts Washington's McCall on the back foot from the outset, having him holed up and recovering in a small coastal village after a particularly grueling bit of equalizing that goes slightly sideways. Of course, it's not all calm and peaceful, with McCall's slow recovery coming with a growing awareness of the corruption and oppression plaguing the people he's grown to care about and driving him to employ his certain set of skills to do something about it. More measured and almost contemplative in comparison to its predecessors. This third outing does a solid job catering for an aging Washington, giving him the opportunity to dish out some brutal, bloody justice, but also avoiding the need for anything desperately outlandish and OTT on the action scale. In that same respect, it very much gives the master the opportunity to breathe and dominate the screen with his sheer presence, something he can absolutely do effortlessly. It's a joy watching him at first awkwardly integrate with the small, close community in a fashion he seemingly managed to avoid his entire life breaking his routines, making in friends. This could almost be a completely different movie without the Equalizer banner. A modern Western in style about a dangerous man recuperating in a small town, becoming lived by the community, and eventually having to fight to defend it. The kind of thing Eastwood would have done with his eyes shut back in the day, and that Washington is a perfect choice to do in the modern era. Of course, eventually it's time for some final act of punishing fury and rounding it all out as a very satisfying final bow for Washington's first and likely only franchise character. Yes, it's not perfect. The much-toed reunion of Washington and his Man on Fire co-star, the now-grown Dakota Fanning, proves to be utterly superfluous, merely affording a franchise-capping tie into previous tertiary characters that had been long forgotten, and gifting her a thankless role that involves her mostly acting like she's the center of this particular criminal enterprise-busting operation. but frequently doing precious little to earn that status beyond follow doggedly in McCall's bloody trail of bodies. And those expecting some kind of wall-to-wall action are going to be perhaps surprised by just how book ended. This is with a majority of the runtime dedicated to a quiet recovery and reflection in a coastal. Now on balance, though it's a very rewarding franchise capper, not wholly dissimilar in the trajectories of Nissan's Taken series and Butler's Fallen series, both with superior first entries, lackluster first sequels, and better third entries, but for of course the overriding presence of the far more commanding Washington at the helm here, who is just reason alone to watch anything. Still playing at the cinema. And now on the home cinema, there's no reason not to check this out for a solid bit of Washington action thrills. It's a good thing Robert McCall takes the bus. This is one guy you wouldn't want to accidentally cut off on the freeway. Oh, he's pleasant enough when you haven't crossed him. In fact, he seems like a really good guy. He works at a Boston home mart, cutting plywood and helping customers. He's been training Ralphie, a fellow home mart employee, to lose a little weight so the guy can apply for a security guard position. When he can't sleep, which is every night, he heads on down to the local diner and reads, exchanging a friendly word or two with the other night owls. The only time Robert gets pushy is when the subject turns to diet. Thought you were giving up on that refined sugar. He chides Terry as she picks at a piece of pie. Terry's a call girl, probably underage. She asks him about the book he's reading. He questions her eating habits. She'd like to be a singer, and sugar can be murder on the vocal cords. They barely know each other. Then one dark evening, sporting a fresh bruise on her cheek, Terry sits down beside Robert at his normal table and hands him a collection of songs she's recorded. Alina is her real name, she tells him, and in the space of a minute or two, without saying much of anything, she somehow spills out her hopelessness, her sorrow over what her life has been, what her life will always be. You know what I really am, she says. Embarrassed. You can be anything you want to be, Robert tells her. And they walk out of the diner together, just talking. A block or two away, an SUV pulls in front of them. A man gets out, grabs Terry, and hits her, forcing her into the vehicle. He looks at Robert and, mistaking him for a John, says Terry's no good. He has one of his henchmen give Robert a card advertising Russian prostitute and tells him to give the number a jingle to get someone better. Next time Robert sees Terry, she's in the hospital, her face looking like it's been grated. He doesn't say hello. She's half unconscious anyway. But in that moment, Robert decides to pay a visit to Slavi, her violent pimp. He hopes the meeting will be just a simple business transaction. But if things turn ugly, Robert knows he can be particularly persuasive when he wants to. Before home art, Robert killed for a living. He could make it quick or excruciating, using a gun or a knife or a hose or a blowtorch. He can transform into a bear just woken, a wildfire just sparked, and he's about to make Slavi an offer that the man really shouldn't refuse. Positive elements. Robert becomes the Equalizer again, reluctantly it would seem. When we first meet him, he's just fine being a regular algae, a friend, an employee, a diner patron. He later says that he laid down his weapons and brutal methods out of respect for his dead wife, and he never planned to pick them up again. But when he sees such a grave injustice, and when he knows he can do something about it, he begins to feel like he has to act. And while we'll take issue with Robert's way of intervening, his motives are always admirable. He's sort of like Batman, you might say, only with a pinion for death and power tools. He very much wants to rescue Terry, a victim of human trafficking, and he even tries to do so at first without violence, plopping nearly $10,000 in front of Slavia as payment for her freedom. When he discovers that policemen are shaking down businesses for protection money, he gives the cops an opportunity to do the right thing too. He's enraged that these dirty officers are disrespecting the badge, and he'll do what he can to encourage them to return to the straight and narrow before laying down the hurt. Indeed, almost every time Robert's about to start maiming and killing folks, he gives them a chance to escape their fearsome fate. But Robert's much more admirable when he's not the dealer of death. He's a mentor, it seems, for nearly everyone he comes across at encouraging Alfie to lay off the potato chips and helping the guy and his mother repair their restaurant when it suffers a mysterious electrical fire. When a thug robs the Home Mart, Robert makes the right decision and gives the guy what he wants, protecting innocent lives. He does get the stolen merchandise back, later forcibly. And when Terry gets out of the hospital, Robert gives her a gift in secret that will make a huge difference in the girl's life. His kindness is repaid, particularly by Ralphie, who risks his life to save his friend in a time of need. Spiritual elements. Ralphie's restaurant-running mother clasps her hands in prayer when her protection money is returned. A Russian icon of Madonna and Child hangs in Slavi's lair. It's sprayed with blood during a battle. When we first see Terry, she wears huge cross earrings. Her friend Mata, also a prostitute, wears a necklace with the sideways cross on it. Teddy, the Equalizer's main villain, is covered in satanic tattoos. Robert says his wife was a big reader when she died. He decided to take up the hobby so that one day we'll have something to talk about. Suggesting a belief in heaven, Slavey Snidley asks a henchman if Slavey looks like Jesus Christ. Sexual romantic content. Terry wears revealing get-ups, including super short shorts, cleavage-bearing tops, and tight dresses. A website for her prostitution service is covered with pictures of women in lingerie. Characters make crude and lewd remarks about prostitution, masturbation, and bits of the human anatomy. We see a guy's torso and quite a lot of his midsection, too. While he showers violent content, Robert would have us believe that he is a reluctant killer, but once he gets started, he's an unstoppable machine, and the results are very, very bloody. Among other things, he jams a corkscrew through a man's chin, and the camera shot is so explicit, we see the metal inside his mouth. He hangs a henchman with barbed wire, staring into the eyes of the gasping, struggling man as he chokes and bleeds out. He skewers somebody with a tree trimmer. He repeatedly shoots a guy with a nail gun, pausing after each pull of the trigger to accentuate the agony. He stabs a man to death with shards of glass. He dispatches another dude with a drill, burrowing into the back of the man's neck. That's one long sentence, but it's not really even long enough, because the carnage just continues and continuous. Robert kills 20 or more villains in increasingly creative ways. Most deaths involve some sort of blade. We see pictures, some sporting grotesque injuries, but he's not above using guns or microwaved oxygen tanks or household electricity or his own neck-snapping hands. Sometimes he aims to hurt, not kill, pummeling a pair of dirty cops into submission until they promise to right their wrongs. Another, he threatens and begins to kill with carbon monoxide poisoning. When a thug steals a ring, Robert borrows a hammer from Home Mart. The ring mysteriously comes back, and we see Robert wiping blood off the hammer before putting it back on display. He gets shot at least twice, and he painfully patches himself up, once using boiling honey to seal the wound. Another time, cauterizing it with a heated door orc knob. He gets cut and pounded on. One of his friends gets shot. Everyone seems to leave trails of blood behind them as they move about. Ships and trucks explode. A man is nearly beaten to death before we watch his assailant picks things, bone fragments. Out of the scraps on his own knuckles, a woman is strangled. 2 crooked cops are found dead, and we're told their testicles were cut off and stuffed in their mouths. We see pictures of their bloody bodies. We hear a story that suggests that he killed his adoptive mother and father. Someone says a prostitute had her face scarred with bathtude or profane language. Why do you curse so much? Robert gently chastises some of his home art colleagues. We could ask the same question of this movie's scriptwriter. While Robert doesn't do much swearing here, everyone around him seems compelled. Fords and about a dozen swords. Also a comma boss H. Hay and P. Karma along with Paw. Y. Cock. Terry flips off a pair of flirty construction workers. God's name is abused a few times twice, with Dan drug alcohol content to bad bites down on a cigarette. Robert buys some over-the-counter medication as a ruse. There's talk of drug dealing. The Equalizer is based on a television show that aired when LStar in the 1980s, and while the original show wasn't exactly opposed to showing some violence, this rated film version takes things to a new disturbing level. While Robert may want to keep his adversaries alive and simply chastened, the movie seems to relish the high degree of pain he inflicts and the gore he creates. There are heavy doses of sadism administered here that rub against our protagonists. Lofty Earth is a desire to see these villains not just eradicated, but made to suffer in extreme ways as they die. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.